We're here at the Randell Research Center at the site of Tampa. This was Tampa, but we're standing about 150 miles south of modern-day Tampa. There is a well-known map, however, of 1683, which shows this name, the native place name. The Bay of Water to our north was Bahia de Tampa, and this was one of the largest of the Calusa towns. It was among large, big communities, including one in Estero Bay on Mound Key and one to our north on Big Mound Key. And the Calusa, at the time of European arrivals, were also controlling many other towns. Well, there was a map maker who made a mistake in the early 1700s, and the name Tampa got shifted to where it's presently located. Well, we're also here at Pineland and this town of Tampa on the shore of an estuary. An estuary is a place where fresh water and salt water mix, and when we're standing up on the top of the Randell Mound here, we can look out to the Gulf of Mexico, and to our south, obscured, but it's there's the Calusa Hatchie bringing fresh water in. To the north are the Peace River and the Mayaca River, and they blend and come together and create what's among the most productive type of habitats anywhere in the world. Estuaries support mangrove ecosystems and seagrass systems, and it was the estuary system that the Calusa and their ancestors depended on, and which allowed them to achieve great power and great success here in South Florida. So by understanding the natural history of the estuary and the natural history of the organisms and the animals that live there, archaeologists working here at Pineland have been able to understand the past of the people who first settled here at 100 AD. Now, there's no written records about and from the Calusa until the 1500s. So far as we know, the Calusa had no written language. So for that first 1,500 years of life here, in order to understand those people and to know about their culture and to preserve their legacy, we excavate in what are known as middens, midden mounds, and in the landscape features. And our archaeologists have had over 75 excavations in over 30 years at this site to understand this place and those people. A midden, it means debris of life. So essentially, yes, garbage. Within the middens and the midden mounds are indicators of environmental change in the past, as well as the artifacts and things that were tools left behind by the Calusa people. These are eastern oysters, and these are crested oysters. Crested oysters exist in higher salinity waters. We get higher salinity waters at various points throughout the estuary, but also when there are prolonged periods of drought and not as much fresh water coming into the estuary. On the eastern oyster, we often will find boring holes from sponges that likewise indicate higher salinity waters. The shells, the lightning whelk and the banded tulip shells, are some of the clues or indicators to where people were going to collect food, particularly when they're in an assemblage, in a mix with other species. They occur near shore, shallow seagrass beds. They don't require hook and line fishing technique. So by careful, detailed analysis through this landscape, we began to understand the resilience of the people here and parts of their cultural development and formation. We also know that they endured an extreme period of long-term cold, and that when that happened, fish were not available in the harbor, and people abandoned this site for about 100 years around AD 800. When they returned about 100 years later, around AD 900, was when they began to use the middens and the midden mounds for everyone living on top of them, and to be building massive structures, as well as excavating a canal here that took the route of what was likely a freshwater stream source to begin with. It was widened, it was excavated till it was 30 feet wide, 8 to 12 feet deep, and went all the way across this island 2.5 miles. the evidence for that kind of construction work, the tools for that work, is also in those middens and those midden mounds. Going into the 1600s, the Calusa established a policy of isolationism. What that effectively did as well was it kept the Calusa somewhat removed from conflicts that broke out between the British and the Spanish. And when those conflicts began, and when the British and their allied Creek Indians prevailed over the Spanish in 1704, it set the stage for Creek and Yamasee people who became professional slavers and were equipped with guns and who came into South Florida to take indigenous native people as slaves. The Calusa had stayed powerful in their own territory. By the 1690s, though, their numbers had been reduced to around 2,000 people. And when the slavers came into their territory equipped with guns, the Calusa had only their basic tools and no guns. In 1711, there's known to have been a group of 270 indigenous Florida people, including Calusa, who went by ship to Cuba. However, it's also written that there were 1,700 some people who were not able to make the journey because there were not spaces on the ship. It's possible that some Calusa and other indigenous people also survived in the hinterlands out of their towns in Florida. So that then later, when other native people flee into Florida and African American runaways flee into Florida, and there began to be an amalgam of cultures that eventually forms the Seminoles, it's possible that Calusa became part of those groups as well. And there is a saying that so long as you're still speaking of them, they're not gone, that they are not extinct. When people visit the Calusa Heritage Trail at the Randell Research Center, what we hope they take away is a sense of place, a sense that people have lived on this landscape for thousands of years, that people came before us, had families here, lived here, fished the estuary here. We find that sometimes people think of early Indian people as being primitive savages. We think when they leave here that they'll understand that they were people living in a place, living well, developing art and music and a spirituality, and that there were times of conflict which caused that culture to be today gone. If we can take lessons from that about how we relate to other people from around the world, that's very important and special. And we do feel by visiting the Randell Research Center and the Calusa Heritage Trail that people can personalize history, that they can look at other cultures even today and understand a bit more, and that they can look at our Southwest Florida environment and understand it a great deal more as well.